The Galactic Academy's Grand Hall of Xenohistory looked less like a classroom and more like a temple carved into the spine of a starship. Curved tiers of obsidian seating spiraled down toward a shimmering holographic podium, where light drifted in slow, solemn waves. Ancient banners of every known species hung from the dome, their edges glowing with soft bioluminescence. To Jekthar, the place always smelled faintly of ozone and reverence, a hall meant for legends, not lectures. Today, however, reverence was in short supply. And so, Instructor Velu droned, tapping the podium with her crystalline claws, the Council's Resolution 001A9 remains our oldest surviving interstellar mandate, the complete and permanent ban of Homo sapiens from all sanctioned military operations. Half the students snickered. Jekthar didn't. He leaned forward, his four-fingered hand tightening on his data plate. The symbols of ancient Terran languages glowed across it, shifting like restless spirits. He'd been waiting all semester for this lecture. Across the hall, fellow cadets whispered loud enough for their arrogance to echo. Humans, the soft-skinned primates that nearly wiped themselves out a dozen times. I heard they cried during war briefings. Look at them, small, fragile. The council banned them because they were too weak, obviously. Weak. Of all the words they could choose. Jekthar exhaled through his gill slits. Steady, restrained. He didn't argue, not yet. He'd learned early that his fascination with humanity made him an outlier, something between eccentric and borderline insane. But there was something in their history the others refused to see. A pattern, a pulse. Humans didn't fight like other species. They didn't break like other species. They changed. They adapted. They endured. Even their myths sounded different, like the universe had built them from defiance. Still, none of that mattered. Not here, not now. The Academy loved order, loved predictability. Humanity was neither. Velu continued, crystalline voice rising. Humanity's ban was not revoked, not amended, not even debated in over 9 millennia. The Council deemed them, she paused, searching for the diplomatic term, potentially destabilizing to cosmic equilibrium. More laughter. Jekthar lowered his eyes. For a moment, all he saw was the soft blue glow of the data plate reflecting against his scaled jaw, words encoded in Terran script scanned by his translator. Humanity is dangerous not because they are strong, but because they refuse to remain weak, a quote from an ancient human general before the ban. He closed the data plate and straightened, lifting his gaze to Velu. Instructor, he said, voice respectful, calm. If humans were merely unstable or primitive, the Council could have reformed them, integrated them, but instead they locked their militaries away forever. The hall quieted. Jekthar rarely spoke. When he did, the room listened in spite of itself. So I ask, he continued softly, what did the Council see that frightened them so deeply? A murmur swept through the students. Some scoffed. Others shifted uneasily. Velu's eyes, clusters of faceted crystal, fixed on him. An interesting question. One the Council considered classified for millennia. Most footage was destroyed. What remains is deemed too provocative for cadets, provocative. Another word that never meant anything good. Jekthar's heart knocked against his rib lattice. He sensed something else too, something subtle and cold, like a pressure in the air. A faint hum inside the bones of the hall, a whisper beneath thought. He didn't have a word for it. Humans would have called it instinct, or something older. Velu flicked her claws across the podium and the hologram shifted to a cluster of glowing star maps. Human space, once vast, now dim, contained, heavily regulated. No species has ever waged war like humans. Not before. Not since. Their strategies were effective but unpredictable. Their emotions volatile. Their morale inexplicably resilient. Students from the Yulkor species hissed dismissively. Their frilled antennae fluttered in mock horror. One clicked its mandibles. Resilient morale? Instructor, that's just biologically inaccurate. No species sustains combat after catastrophic losses. That's not strategy, and that's insanity. Jekthar swallowed. The memory of something he'd read, something old, surfaced. They called it madness. We called it Monday, a human soldier's field note. Velu lifted a clawed hand. Enough. This lecture is not an invitation for mockery. Humanity is a complex and unique subject. It demands respect. But even as she said it, her tone softened as though she didn't believe it fully, as though she had never seen what Jekthar suspected she had access to. He felt frustration twist inside him. Quiet, controlled, if they only knew. If they saw even 1 minute of real Terran combat footage, they'd never laugh again. He glanced at the banners overhead. They swayed gently, though there was no wind. Something unseen brushed through the hall, a feeling like the universe holding its breath. He didn't know if it was imagination, or intuition, or something higher, something that had guided him since childhood, when he first found an old Terran prayer etched into a displaced memory core. God, carry me through the fire. He never understood the meaning, but the feeling remained, an unseen order in chaos, a quiet presence behind survival. Maybe humans sensed it too. Maybe that's why they prayed before battle. Velu's voice broke his thought. Now let us review the Council's justification. Humans lacked mental inhibitors present in all sapient species except... A beeping tone chimed from the center of the hall. Students looked up. A symbol flashed across the podium. One no one expected to see. Security Class 10. Clearance override content. Lock breach detected source. Unknown. Velu's voice faltered. That should be impossible. A cold ripple passed through the lecture hall. Jekthar's heart thudded. He knew that symbol. He'd seen it in forbidden archives. It only appeared for one thing: Terran combat footage. Unredacted. Students leaned forward eagerly, some in excitement, some in fear, some in disbelief. Velu tried to shut down the podium. It appears we have a technical malfunction. You will all remain calm while I... The lights dimmed. The banners overhead stopped swaying, and a new hologram materialized, not the calm blue of academic maps, but harsh gold crackling with static. A voice distorted. Human whispered through the speakers. If anyone finds this, keep recording. More static. A second voice, louder, terrified. They're still coming! How are they still coming? Gasps filled the hall. Velu dropped her data plate. Jekthar's breath froze. All at once, the hall grew impossibly quiet, like creation itself paused. A grainy image sharpened in the air. Ruined terrain, smoke, fire, shadows of moving soldiers, humans, real humans. Their armor scorched, their breaths ragged, their hands shaking yet still reaching for each other, pulling fallen comrades to safety, whispering prayers under their breaths. One soldier, face half burned, lifted his rifle with trembling hands. God, guide my aim. The shot fired. The screen shook. The cadets flinched. This wasn't simulation footage. It wasn't history. Jekthar felt his blood run cold. It was too clear, too raw, too real. Velu stared in horror. This is not possible. This recording is not part of the Academy archives. The soldier on screen looked up, not at the enemy, but as if sensing something watching him from across light years. For an instant, Jekthar felt the man's eyes meet his, a connection so real it made his heart stutter, as if the human knew, somehow this moment would be witnessed far beyond his battlefield. Then a warning flashed across the hologram. Live transmission source. Unknown Terran signal distance. 14 light minutes status. Active engagement. The room erupted in panic. Jekthar remained still. Not from fear, but awe. Because the universe didn't make coincidences down to the minute. Something unseen had guided this broadcast here. Now directly into the one lecture hall studying the human. He didn't know if it was fate, or the quiet intelligence behind the stars, but he felt it. The Yao, Terrans weren't myths, they weren't weak. They were close and they were fighting. Somewhere in the void, humanity was still refusing to die. Jekthar's hands trembled. Not in fear, but certainty. Instructor, he whispered. This isn't malfunction. Velu turned slowly, voice barely a breath. Then what is it? Jekthar swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the bleeding hologram. A warning. The gunfire on the recording grew louder. In the background, alarms blared, voices screamed, and above it all, then a steady, fierce heartbeat of human defiance echoed through the hall's speakers. The cadets stopped. Laughing, the galaxy held still, and the screen flickered to reveal something vast behind. The human lines, and a shadow of metallic titans emerging through the smoke. Terran, Ships, warships, real, active, alive, not. Relics from the past. The Terran fleet had returned, and they were close enough that their battle was leaking into every channel the Academy possessed. Velu whispered the words no one thought they would. Ever here again, cadets? This isn't history. Jekthar felt a chill bloom beneath his scales. This is happening right now. The hologram crackled like lightning caught inside glass. The battlefield stabilized into clarity. Jagged ruins, burning sky, the shriek of wind slicing through metal. Smoke rolled across the horizon like a living creature. Somewhere within it, human voices shouted orders, curses, prayers, all blending into a single desperate rhythm. The rhythm of survival. Cadets who had mocked humans only minutes before now sat frozen. Antennae curled tight, pupils contracted to fearful pinpoints. Even the largest species among them, the stone-skinned Gortul, stiffened as the image zoomed in on a squad of battered, bleeding Terrans sprinting through a collapsing trench line. Instructor? One Gortul rumbled. This cannot be real. Terrans have no active fleet. Their system is under quarantine. Velu did not answer. Her crystalline eyes reflected the hologram with eerie stillness. It was the look of someone whose understanding of the universe had just buckled. Jekthar watched too, though not with fear. With something deeper, something like recognition. The lead human soldier, the burned one, stumbled behind cover as artillery fire hammered the ground. He collapsed to his knees, gasping, clutching his chest. Blood matted his armor. Another soldier knelt beside him, placing a hand over his. "Stay with me, Reyes." Reyes laughed, a cracked, impossibly human sound. "You think I'm checking out before payday?" He raised trembling eyes to the ruined heavens. "God kept me alive this long. I'm not dying in a ditch." Jekthar felt something tighten in his throat. Faith. That quiet, stubborn faith. The kind that didn't need proof, only purpose. Around the hall, cadets whispered, they should be dead already. No species fights like that after losing half its squad. Why aren't they retreating? Velu stepped toward the hologram, voice shaking. Their morale indicators. They are, she swallowed, increasing. Jekthar's breath caught. Humans weren't obeying logic. They were defying it. The unseen presence of blast tore through the trench on screen, and dust engulfed the soldiers in a cloud of debris. Static washed over the feed. The cadets flinched, but Jekthar felt something else. A shift in the hall. A stillness, as if the universe itself leaned closer for a better view. For the second time, he sensed the same presence he'd felt earlier. Not a voice, not a being, just a quiet order behind chaos. A memory whispered through his mind. That old Terran prayer etched in the core he found as a child. Carry me through the fire. The static faded. Reyes coughed and pushed himself upright. He had survived an explosion that vaporized the armor on his left shoulder. Impossible. Unless, no. Jekthar shook the thought away, but still, the feeling lingered. That unseen balance, nudging events just enough to keep them alive, not altering fate, only tilting it. Even Velu whispered almost reverently, how did he survive that blast? Jekthar had a quiet, dangerous suspicion. Maybe humans never fought alone. The audio bleed, the hologram zoomed out suddenly, showing the full scope of the conflict. A Terran forward outpost, half collapsed. Burning, enemy shapes skittering through smoke, angular. Insectoid silhouettes with metallic limbs and razor-thin wings. Jekthar recognized them instantly. Krith swarm, he breathed, one of the most relentless predatory species in known space. Several cadets hissed in horror. The Krith aren't even in this sector. They shouldn't be anywhere near Terran quarantine space. Is this invasion footage? Velu's voice was brittle glass. This cannot be happening. The Krith alone are enough to annihilate. The audio feed exploded into clarity, overriding her words. Rally on me. Hold this line, hold it! A deeper voice roared over the gunfire. A human officer, tall, armored, bleeding from the temple, eyes burning with unbroken defiance. Behind him, a handful of surviving Terrans braced themselves against incoming swarm fire. One of the younger cadets whispered, trembling, why aren't they fleeing? Jekthar's voice was a soft, haunted answer. Because humans don't run from the impossible. He didn't say it loudly. He didn't need to. The entire hall heard him. The tactical impossibility on screen, the officer tapped his wrist display with bloody fingers, projecting a small 3D map. Swarms flanking from east. Reyes, you're with me. Ortiz set up the scatter mines. The rest of you, he pointed toward the smoke. We push forward. One of his soldiers stared at him like he'd lost his mind. Forward? Sir, our flank is gone. Another shouted. We should fall back to the ridge. The officer looked at them, exhausted, furious, unyielding. No. If we fall back, we give the swarm momentum. If we push forward, we take it back. A heartbeat of stunned silence. Then Reyes gave a hoarse laugh. Madman, you heard the captain. Move! The soldiers moved without hesitation. Without question. With absolute trust. Jekthar felt something cold and electric run through him. Humans weren't fighting for victory. They were fighting because stopping wasn't in their design. This wasn't logic. This was will. The cadets break. The footage zoomed out again. The humans charged, straight into the advancing swarm. Jaws dropped across the lecture hall. Yilkor's student trembled so hard his antennae rattled. That is suicidal. 1 squad against 100 Krith? Another croaked. That's not strategy. Velu whispered. Then what is it? Jekthar answered quietly. Humanity. The moment of fear, a Krith hunter leapt from the smoke, landing atop Reyes. Its blade-like limbs plunged downward. A gunshot split the air. The hunter's head burst apart. The human captain had fired without even looking. Gasps echoed through the hall. What reflexes are those? That was pre-sensory aim. Impossible! Another Krith pounced. Then another. And another. The swarm surged. And the humans didn't retreat. Not a single step. They fought shoulder to shoulder, covering each other with perfect trust, synchronizing movements like a single organism with one heartbeat. Jackie, Thar felt his own breath grow shaky. He had known humans were dangerous. He had never understood why. Until now. It wasn't their weapons. It wasn't their technology. It wasn't even their strange biology. It was their refusal to break, their refusal to surrender to despair, their belief in each other, in survival, in something greater watching over them, carried them through things no rational species would attempt. A cadet whispered, Are they even alive or just refusing to die? The shift in the sky suddenly, the battlefield darkened, not from smoke, from shadow. The camera tilted upward, and a massive silhouette passed overhead, blacking out the burning sky. A ship, angular, silent, colossal. Every cadet in the hall froze. Velu's voice cracked. No, those designs were outlawed. Jekthar's hearts hammered. He knew that shape. He had seen it only in forbidden schematics. A Terran warship, old, ancient, but unmistakably human. As the ship passed overhead, its hull markings glowed through the smoke. TFS Resurrector, a murmur spread through the hall like a shockwave. Terran fleet ship? They cannot have any surviving dreadnoughts. How did they hide this? How are they even here? Velu whispered, This footage. It isn't archived. This is a live fleet engagement. Jekthar swallowed hard. The ship's engines rumbled in the feed, deep and resonant, like a beast waking after millennia. Reyes looked up, breath shaking with emotion. They came back for us. Human soldiers paused in just a second, staring at the ship as if witnessing a miracle. Maybe they were. The impossible broadcast, a sharp tone suddenly cut through the room. All screens in the lecture hall, all personal devices, all hologrid surfaces flickered. Symbols flashed in rapid succession. Terran signal priority, override channels hijacked, 948-0. Broadcasting galaxy-wide unknown authorization. Velu gasped. This transmission isn't just in our hall. Jekthar felt his scales rise. It isn't a malfunction, he whispered. This was meant to be seen. The hologram sharpened to reveal one last image, a human captain and standing atop a ridge, bloodied, panting, but unbowed, raising one hand toward the sky. The Terran dreadnought descended like an avenging angel. He whispered something, too soft for the mic. Yet somehow, every cadet heard it, not today. And then, a blinding pulse of energy burst from the dreadnought's underbelly, cutting the swarm in half, lighting the battlefield with divine fury. The cadets screamed. Velu staggered back. Jekthar's breath caught in awe because, in that moment, with the blast, illuminating the field like judgment itself, the presence he felt earlier surged again. Quiet, vast, like the universe holding the humans in its hands, as if something beyond biology wanted them to live. Silence. Not the ordinary kind, not the polite hush of a classroom or the stunned quiet of disbelief. This was deeper, a silence that felt carved out of the world itself. The silence before a storm breaching reality. The hologram still flickered above the podium, but no one looked at it now. Every pair of eyes, alien, crystalline, compound, or scaled, were fixed on the line of text glowing across every display in the grand. All-second Terran signature detected origin. Unknown. Vector. Direct approach toward Academy. Orbit Velu whispered the words like someone reciting a funeral prophecy. There's another one. Jekthar felt something low in his chest. A pressure, a warning. A sense of divine timing too perfect to be accident. A Terran ship arriving exactly as the galaxy was forced to watch forbidden footage? That wasn't coincidence. That was orchestration. He didn't know if it was human ingenuity, fate, or the unseen hand that kept nudging the universe forward. But he felt the truth sharpen inside him. The galaxy hadn't just stumbled onto a secret. The secret was knocking on their door. The Hall Erupt's pandemonium broke like a shattered lens. Cadets leapt from their seats shouting over one another, "Evacuate the ring." "Are we under attack?" "Terrans can't reach this sector, it's restricted." "We're not equipped for combat." "Why are they coming here?" The Yulkor students, normally smug and arrogant, clutched each other with trembling antennae as if the air itself had turned predatory. One Gortul slammed his stone fists onto the railing. "This has to be a trick." The humans were banished. Velu did not answer. Her eyes, usually crystalline and unreadable, were wide with something Jekthar had never seen from her. Fear. Real, primitive fear. Not because humanity was arriving, but because no one knew why. The incoming transmission, the lights dimmed again. At first, Jekthar thought it was another system failure, another breach. But then he felt it, that stillness. The same quiet presence he'd felt each time the human footage shifted. A whisper beneath thought, a balance behind chaos, something that made the hairs along his spine lift. The podium flickered. The hologram blinked, glitched, then snapped into clarity so sharp it seemed to cut the air. A new symbol appeared. Unencrypted Terran transmission, priority broadcast. No security, key detected decryption, not required. Velu froze. No encryption? That's impossible. No species broadcasts military intel publicly. Jekthar felt his pulse spike. Humans did. If the situation was dire enough, if survival outweighed secrecy, humans told the truth loud enough for the galaxy to hear. Static hissed. Then a voice, deep, steady, human, filled the hall. To whoever receives this, we mean no harm. Dozens of cadets gasped. A shadowed figure appeared on the hologram. Humanoid, helmeted, backlit by blue emergency lights and drifting smoke. Sparks flickered along the ceiling behind him. The ship he stood on was clearly damaged. He lifted off his helmet. A scarred human face stared out at the Academy, tired, blood-smeared, eyes burning with something that wasn't madness or rage, but determination and grief. The cadets recoiled. Jekthar leaned forward. Velu whispered, Who are you?" The man answered as though hearing her across light years. "Captain Elias Ward, Terran Fleet. Last surviving senior officer of the Resurrectors Vanguard Strike Group. Last surviving." Jekthar felt a prick of dread. Behind Ward, alarms flashed red. The ship rocked as if struck by distant impacts. Ward continued, "If you're receiving this, it means our backup transmitter succeeded. We're being pursued, and your academy lies on their projected intercept path." The hall exploded into panic. Pursued by what? Are the Krith coming here? "We have no defenses strong enough." "The Council will never reach us in time." Ward raised a hand, not in command, but in appeal. "Listen, please, the Krith aren't coming." He exhaled shakily. "They're already here." A piercing alarm blared through the academy walls, not from the hologram, not from the footage, from the academy's real emergency system. The lights turned crimson. Reality cracks, open. A cold tremor of fear swept through the room, the kind that didn't come from instinct, but from truth colliding with denial. Velu turned to the ceiling speakers. Academy security, confirm. The intercom crackled. This is Central Watchtower. Unidentified vessels. Dropping from subspace Vector 082. Hostile signatures, confirmed. The voice broke into static as a second, sharper tone rang out. Battle stations. This is not a drill repeat. This is not a drill. Cadets panicked, stumbling over each other, scrambling for exits. The room became a tidal wave of bodies and fear, but Jekthar didn't move. He couldn't. He wasn't frozen from fear. He was watching Ward. Ward's face had not changed. He didn't panic. He didn't shout. He simply closed his eyes for a moment, and Jekthar saw his lips move silently. Not a tactical command, a prayer, a soft, exhausted whisper. Lord, give me strength. Jekthar felt that unseen presence again, the same subtle hand guiding the impossible, not intervening, not reshaping the world, simply there, quiet, immense, as if acknowledging the words of a dying man who still refused to let hope die with him. When Ward opened his eyes again, every cadet who hadn't fled stared at him, because that was not the face of a monster or a myth or a threat. That was a man ready to die so others could live. Ward looked straight into the lens, voice steadier now. If you can evacuate your cadets, do it. The Krith want us, but they'll tear through anything in their path. Velu found her voice. Why are you coming toward us? She cried. Ward's expression tightened. Because if we break off course, we leave civilians to die. And Terrans don't abandon the innocent. The words hit the hall like a shockwave. Cadets froze mid-step. Velu's jaw trembled. Jekthar's hearts pounded because that was the truth the universe never wrote. Down, humans weren't dangerous because they loved war. Humans were dangerous because they refused to let others suffer in their place. A sudden vibration shook the hall, rattling banners and floor plates. The ship had arrived. A deep, thunderous boom rolled across the academy walls, the unmistakable echo of something massive dropping out of subspace, close enough to shake the planet's exosphere. Velu grabbed the podium. Is that? The hologram behind Ward flickered again, replaced by a live exterior feed. A colossal Terran vessel shimmered into orbit, its hull scarred, smoking, but unmistakably alive. The cadet screamed. Thar did not. His breath left him in a single stunned exhale, because the ship was not just large, it was wrong. Impossible. A design the Council had wiped out of the archives. A legend, a myth, a ghost, a Terran Arc class. Ward's voice returned, softer now, weighted with a truth he could no longer hide. We didn't want this. We didn't choose this. But if the Krith come for your world, humanity will stand between you and extinction. The transmission crackled. Ward pressed a hand to a console as explosions echoed behind him. This is Captain Ward. Terran Fleet, requesting permission to protect your people. The hologram cut, every screen went black. The hall fell into a silence so profound, Jekthar felt his pulse in his throat, then a single new message blinked across the display. Kryth Raid Force, 21 ships, ETA. 8 minutes, cadets screamed. Sirens blared. Panic detonated. And in the center of it all, breathing hard, trembling with awe and dread, Jekthar whispered the only truth that made sense in this new reality. Humanity didn't return to wage war. His eyes rose to the ghostly outline of the Terran ship hovering above them. They returned to save us. The Academy trembled, not from the terror in the cadets' hearts, not from the alarms that had transformed the lecture hall into chaos, but from the subtle, omnipresent weight of inevitability. The Terran Arc class hung in orbit like a blade poised over the planet. Its hull scarred, engines simmering, the ship radiated an aura that made even the bravest cadets feel small. It was enormous, alive with energy, and defiant against the laws of physics and probability alike. And from it, another transmission pulsed down. This one quieter, more intimate. Less command, more warning, To those on the surface, Ward's voice carried over every emergency channel, calm yet edged with urgency. Brace yourselves. The Krith won't wait. The warning barely settled before the first tremor ripped through the academy grounds. The walls vibrated with deep, resonant power, the unmistakable signature of massive weapons charging in orbit. Panic erupted. Students and instructors alike threw themselves to the floor, the hall convulsing as if the planet itself had shuddered in fear. Jekthar's gill slits flared. His heart raced, not in terror but in comprehension. They were witnessing more than survival. They were witnessing human resolve in action. The first strike from the orbiting arc, a pulse cannon discharged. It wasn't a careless explosion. It was precise, surgical, devastating. The energy ripped through the void and struck a group of Krith interceptors skimming the upper atmosphere. The sky ignited with arcs of fire, followed by the shriek of dissolving metal and shrieking plasma echoes. Cadets screamed. Some vomited from the sudden shockwave. Velu staggered, clutching the railing as shards of warning lights scattered across the hall. Jekthar remained rooted, mesmerized. Every calculation, every principle of warfare he had ever studied, screamed that this was impossible. The Ark class wasn't a single vessel. It was a fleet hidden in one body. A single Terran ship could not have pulled this off. And yet here it was. Not possible, Velu whispered, her voice cracking like ice. Terrans were extinct, but Jekthar had learned better. He leaned forward, translating instinct into understanding. The human's reputation was not built on weapons or fleets or even strategy alone. It was built on will, the ground assault. The first Krith dropships pierced the upper atmosphere like jagged meteors. The Academy's planetary shields flared in response, a temporary barrier of shimmering light, but they were too few, too slow, and the ships themselves were only the advance wave. Then came the Terrans, not just from orbit. From hidden bunkers, underground tunnels, and disguised launch points around the planet, a chorus of engines and armored exosuits erupted in perfect unison, converging on the Academy's periphery. Humans didn't march. They flowed. They adapted. They moved with synchronized unpredictability, using terrain, rubble, and instinct as weapons. Jekthar watched as a squadron of human infantry, small, fragile, and exhausted, pulled a collapsing Krith war beast into a trap. Mines detonated, plasma arcs scorched the air, and yet for all the destruction, the humans never lost cohesion. Every fallen soldier was immediately assisted, shielded, or evacuated. Not one left behind. One young cadet, eyes wide with awe, whispered, "They're saving each other." "Not saving each other," Jekthar corrected softly. "Protecting each other. It's not empathy, they fight with it." Velu, for once silent, watched the display with a mix of disbelief and dread. She had studied humans academically, but she had never seen them live. Never like this. Never like the living, breathing defiance unfolding across the screen. The unseen guidance amidst the chaos. Jekthar noticed something subtle. Tiny coincidences in timing, slight nudges in luck, explosions that missed just enough to leave civilians untouched. Plasma fire that curved around a group of fleeing students, weapons misfired at just the right angle. It was as if an unseen hand balanced the battlefield, tipping the scales only enough to allow humans to keep moving. A flash of memory surfaced. The prayer from the memory core he had found as a child. "Carry me through the fire." It was not luck. It was not random, it was divine rhythm. He shivered, not in fear but in awe. This subtle presence wove through the chaos, invisible yet undeniable. He realized the human's survival was never complete chance. Somewhere, somehow, the universe had conspired to let them persist. Internal conflict, Jekthar's thoughts were torn. He felt awe, fear, hope, and despair in equal measure. How could a single species believed extinct execute such a flawless living defense? And more importantly, why had the Council banned them instead of studying them? Why had the galaxy lived under a lie of Terran weakness? He wanted to shout, to scream at the hypocrisy of generations. He wanted to believe in the Council's wisdom and the Academy's teachings. But every second of the live feed tore those lessons to shreds. He glanced at Velu. She was staring at him, her expression a mixture of accusation and awe. Do you know what's happening here?" Jekthar's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, and it's worse than we imagined. Worse, not for humanity, but for the arrogant aliens who had dismissed them. Every laugh, every mockery over millennia was about to be repaid, not with malice but with undeniable truth. Human ingenuity on display. The feed zoomed in on a squad trapped between two Krith-flanking wings. Dozens of alien predators, metallic and merciless. The squad's leader, a female human, her armor scorched and her face caked in soot, tapped a wrist console. A holographic field shimmered around the squad for a moment, almost invisible. Then the terrain itself seemed to respond. Debris shifted. Rubble fell strategically, collapsing onto the Krith's path. The squad's path cleared by cunning placement, not brute strength. One of the cadets gasped. "They're using the environment." "Yes," Jekthar replied. "But notice how seamless it is. They aren't thinking tactically in the traditional sense. They're thinking creatively, desperately, and together." The squad moved like a single organism, covering each other, drawing fire, and then vanishing into rubble corridors. Each move was unpredictable, counterintuitive, and deadly effective. No other species in the galaxy could do this. Not with equipment alone, not with numbers, not with instinct. Only humans could combine all three with relentless courage. The first casualty. The first human casualty occurred not through failure, but through sacrifice. A young soldier dove into a beam of plasma to shield two civilians trapped in a collapsing structure. He survived only because of a companion's quick reflexes. His eyes met the camera, and for a heartbeat he looked directly at the viewers in the academy. "Not today," he whispered. Jekthar felt a lump in his throat. It was not just a battle cry. It was a message, a defiance that transcended survival. Humans didn't fight merely for victory. They fought to protect, to endure, to honor those they could not abandon. Velu turned to him, voice trembling. "Do you understand now?" Jekthar nodded slowly. Words failed him. Nothing could explain the sheer magnitude of human courage and ingenuity streaming across the hall. He felt reverence, the kind reserved for beings who could alter the galaxy's perception with nothing but willpower and faith. The moral lesson arrives. The Krith retreated temporarily, regrouping for another assault. But the humans held. Every counter, every strategy, every desperate maneuver revealed a pattern. Humans were not merely reacting. They were improvising. They were innovating under pressure, improvising miracles from what should have been certain death. The cadets realized something in that moment. Humanity had never been weak. The ban had not been a punishment. It had been protection. Protection for a galaxy unready to confront creatures who could combine ingenuity, empathy, and defiance in a way no other species could. Jekthar's eyes shone. The lesson was clear. The Council had feared humans not for what they could destroy, but for what they could inspire. The first hook above the battlefield, the Ark class adjusted its orbit. From the command deck, Captain Ward activated another pulse cannon. The energy wave rippled across the sky, striking the approaching Krith formations like a lightning strike sent by gods. The cadets' jaws dropped. The Terran ship was not only alive, it was commanding the battle, anticipating moves with preternatural precision. Jekthar watched, spellbound, as the humans below adapted instantly. Survival became orchestration. Will became strategy. Faith became weapon. And somewhere in the chaos, Jekthar felt it again, the presence. Subtle, vast, unexplainable. Not dictating, not controlling, simply acknowledging, watching, guiding, smiling perhaps at the relentless defiance of humans. He swallowed, voice tight. They weren't weak. They were never weak. They were just waiting for the universe to notice. The academy was chaos incarnate. Sirens wailed, red lights pulsed like hearts under stress, and cadets screamed over one another, tripping over their own fear. Panic became a living creature, writhing and clawing through every corridor. Jekthar moved differently. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He observed. Every tremor in the walls, every flicker in the emergency lights, every movement of terrified cadets. It was a puzzle. And he understood instinctively that the humans in the orbiting Ark class had faced something like this before, only infinitely more dangerous. Humans thrived when the odds were stacked impossibly against them. They were never perfect. They were always persistent. And that persistence was infectious. But Jekthar sensed the first crack in their defense. Not from the Krith swarm, but from something far more subtle, far more insidious, the enemy within. Sabotage in the hall, Velu screamed as the main control panel flickered violently. "Security breach!" she shouted, but no one could hear her over the chaos. Something has overridden the locks. Jekthar's gaze snapped to the nearest student clusters. Some of the cadets were panicking, others were too stunned to move, and one was moving with alarming precision. Not the hurried panic of fear, but the calm, deliberate steps of intent. He watched as the student reached for a data plate, not to check readings, but to override systems. Someone was working from inside the academy. Someone with access, someone trained. The Krith were relentless. But now, humanity's greatest trial was in the same room. He realized, suddenly, the humans hadn't returned merely to fight aliens. They were about to confront the galaxy's complacency, arrogance, and betrayal. The ticking clock. Jekthar checked his data plate. The Academy's shields were failing, not from external pressure, but from the sabotage. Systems that should have been impenetrable were shutting down, one by one. Air circulation, power distribution, gravity stabilizers. Even the emergency response bots were flickering with glitches. The ARC class above could only do so much. The humans were already stretched to their limits, coordinating orbital strikes while the Krith pressed the attack. Now, an unknown hand was undermining them from the inside. Velu barked commands, but her crystalline voice was brittle under strain. "We need to seal the security breach now. Everyone away from the data pads." Some cadets froze. Others bolted. Jekthar stood still, analyzing. He had only one thought. This was a test not of technology, but of spirit. And the humans he'd watched on the battlefield would not fail, because someone pressed the wrong buttons. They would fail only if hope itself died. And hope, Jekthar knew, was never gone for humans. A human lesson in desperation. The live feed from the ARC class cut in just in time to show the orbital battle's intensity. The Terrans weren't simply fighting. They were improvising, maneuvering through the swarm using debris as shields and directing fire with surgical precision that defied all known physics. The humans in orbit had learned that victory came not from perfection, but from persistence. Jekthar's heart thumped as the camera focused on Ward, leaning over his console. Sweat and blood streaked his face. Every decision was a risk. Every order could be fatal. But he moved with certainty. "We've survived worse," Ward muttered, voice rough. "Then we survived this too." Jekthar felt an ache of recognition. This was the same spirit he had observed in Reyes, in the soldiers risking their lives below. Humans thrived under impossible odds. They didn't just endure, they calculated, improvised, and leapt with faith. Faith in each other. Faith in survival. Faith in something greater that nudged the impossible just slightly enough to allow life to persist. The saboteur revealed. Jekthar turned back to the hall. The student manipulating the systems paused, realizing someone had noticed. He or she was young, reckless, filled with misguided ambition. But the intent was clear. They wanted to control the narrative, dictate the outcome, and prove the Terrans were not gods but prey. Jekthar acted. He intercepted, moving with precision, placing a scaled hand over the data plate. The student jerked back. Their eyes, wide with fear, met his. "You don't understand," the cadet hissed. "I understand perfectly," Jekthar said, voice steady. "Humans aren't here for control. They're here to survive, and to show the galaxy why the Council feared them." A pulse of fear and awe ran through the student. The panic was real, but so was the recognition. Jekthar's voice carried weight even in the din of sirens and alarms. "Step aside, or get out of the way. Trust what they are doing." The student froze, then reluctantly obeyed. Jekthar stabilized the system just enough to prevent total collapse. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't permanent. But it was enough. The first human ground forces outside the hall. The Terrans were making landfall. Squads deployed from stealth transports, moving with precision through burning streets and collapsing structures. Smoke and debris swirled, but they advanced, unyielding. Each squad leader shouted orders, covering one another, improvising strategies on the fly. Jekthar observed, memorizing the patterns, the timing, the ingenuity. Humans were small, vulnerable, but their coordination was astonishing. Their actions weren't just tactics, they were stories in motion. Every move carried emotion, risk, and belief. Velu whispered almost to herself. They're coordinating perfectly. Yes, Jekthar replied softly. Because they aren't perfect, but they are human. The arc above provided fire support, but the humans on the ground made the difference. They weren't just surviving, they were turning the tide. They adapted faster than any species the Academy had ever catalogued. Every obstacle became a tool, every threat an opportunity. Sacrifice and defiance. Jekthar's eyes caught a soldier throwing herself into a collapsing corridor to hold a door shut while civilians escaped. The debris would have crushed her instantly, had it not been for her companion's quick intervention. A cadet behind him whispered, "They're fearless, reckless." Jekthar shook his head. "They're courageous. Fearless doesn't exist. Courage does." Velu, who had always emphasized logic and analysis, was trembling. But why? Why do they keep risking themselves like that? Jekthar glanced at the live feed. A man in the rubble lifted a dying creature, alien or human, whispering to it in Terran. "Not luck. Someone wanted me to live." Jekthar's hearts tightened. He finally understood. Humans didn't act for glory or for victory alone. They acted because someone, somewhere had to survive. Faith, divine or human, was their constant companion. Survival was their art. Hope their weapon. The first lesson settled. The cadets, previously mocking and arrogant, were silent. Their disbelief had transformed into something heavier. Respect, awe, and fear laced with admiration. They watched as the humans turned impossible odds into temporary triumphs. Jekthar felt something shift inside him. He had spent lifetimes reading about humans, memorizing their myths, studying archives long forbidden. He had imagined greatness, but this was beyond imagination. It wasn't just courage. It wasn't just strategy. It wasn't even faith. It was the combination of all three. Bound by creativity, empathy, and relentless defiance, they weren't legends. They weren't myths. They were the universe's reckoning. The first price paid. Then, a massive tremor shook the city. The academy floor cracked. Debris fell. One of the cadets was pinned. Gasps and cries erupted. Jekthar reacted instantly, leaping forward, scales scraping against the floor. He lifted the rubble just enough for the student to escape. But the act reminded him, survival had a cost. Every victory exacted a price. And for the humans, that cost was constant, unending, and personal. Above, the Ark class released a devastating pulse to annihilate the approaching Krith dropships. But the shockwave rattled buildings. Civilians screamed. Minor casualties were unavoidable. Even in triumph, there was sacrifice. Jekthar realized that this was another lesson humans were teaching. Courage was not painless. Bravery was not clean. Life was not fair. And yet, humans endured, and they inspired others to endure as well. Smoke and fire painted the academy in impossible colors, orange bleeding into black, shadows twisting against flickering red alarms. The cadets scrambled, some in blind panic, some in stunned paralysis. Panic had become a contagion. But amidst it, Jekthar's thoughts were sharp, precise, even amidst chaos. He had watched the humans fight on the battlefield, in orbit, and across the city. He had watched courage and ingenuity bend reality, and yet now a creeping doubt gnawed at him. This was only the beginning. The humans had come to save the academy, yes, but what else had they brought? There was something deeper, subtle, almost imperceptible. A whisper of the divine Jekthar glanced toward the massive holofeed. The Ark class shimmered above the planet, engines blazing, weapons dancing across the sky in perfect orchestration. The humans moved with synchronicity that felt preordained, almost guided. He felt it again. The same presence that had whispered through every human survival he'd ever seen. Not God in form, but God in rhythm. In timing. In coincidence, that was too precise to be chance. The Ark class fired another pulse weapon. Krith ships disintegrated mid-flight. Below, humans moved through collapsing streets, pulling civilians and injured soldiers from danger. Every step, every act seemed watched, guided. Not forced, not controlled, simply assured. Velu, standing beside him, muttered, "It's like someone's looking out for them." "Yes," Jekthar whispered. "They survive because something refuses to let them fail." He felt it in the way debris shifted just enough for humans to pass. In the timing of explosions. In the precise trajectory of weapons. Subtle, unseen, divine. Internal conflict, Jekthar's minds raced. He had studied humans academically, understood them in theory, memorized legends and myths, but reality was different. Legends were stories. Reality was fire, blood, and improvisation, and he realized something troubling. The human strength could inspire not just awe, but terror. The galaxy had been afraid of them for a reason. He turned to Velu. "Do you understand now why the Council banned them?" Her eyes widened. "Because they're unstoppable." "No," Jekthar said softly, shaking his head. "Because no one else can survive like this. Because their courage, their ingenuity, their empathy, it cannot be measured. It cannot be contained, and it doesn't obey the rules of war or diplomacy." The fear in her crystalline gaze mirrored his own. For the first time, the impossible made sense. The Terrans were dangerous not for malice, but for their indomitable will. The enemy within revealed. The Academy's alarms screamed again. The cadets flinched. And then came a new warning. "Internal systems breach." Saboteur detected Jekthar's gaze snapped to the control hub. The cadet he had restrained earlier was gone. In their place, a trail of code overriding subsystems, disrupting shields, destabilizing emergency protocols. Someone inside the Academy was working against humanity's intervention. Not the Krith, not the Arc class above, but an alien. One who feared the humans, or perhaps hated them. Jekthar's internal conflict sharpened into clarity. This battle was no longer merely survival against external forces. It was a test of loyalty, courage, and judgment. He had to act. He moved fast, scales scraping against the floor, arms stretching to block the datapad access. The saboteur turned, panic and rage flashing across their features. "You don't understand," the cadet shouted. "They can't be allowed here. They'll destroy everything we know. They've already saved more than you'll ever protect in your lifetime." Jekthar shot back, voice trembling with the weight of truth. "Step aside. Trust them or be swept away." The cadet hesitated. Fear wavered. Respect, reluctant, grudging, and terrified, crept in. Jekthar secured the system enough to stabilize shields, just enough for the Arc class to maintain orbital support. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't enough for victory, but it was a start. The humans' ingenious tactics outside, the Terrans adapted again. Ground squads synchronized with orbital fire. Barricades were constructed in real time. Debris transformed into traps, and every squad covered the other flawlessly. Even minor mistakes were compensated instantly. One scene cut through the chaos. A human engineer, injured, crawling across open terrain under fire, dropped a device that emitted an electromagnetic pulse. It disabled a swarm of Krith drones poised to annihilate civilians. The engineer's legs gave out, but he pushed forward until the pulse detonated. Then he collapsed. Jekthar's minds echoed with realization. Every human act was a combination of desperation and brilliance. It wasn't brute force. It wasn't technological superiority. It was ingenuity under pressure, fueled by empathy and unyielding will. Cadets whispered in awe. "They're unstoppable. No species moves like this. Impossible." Jekthar didn't reply. He only observed, trying to memorize every motion, every decision, every heartbeat of courage. The Terran Arc's sacrifice suddenly, the Arc class above shifted. Its engines flared with violent brightness. Another pulse cannon fired, but the resulting shockwave rippled across the planet, collapsing parts of the city. Cadets screamed as the structural tremors reached the Academy. Debris fell. Fires ignited. Civilians outside panicked. Jekthar understood immediately. The Arc class had made a conscious sacrifice. Not to destroy, but to protect. The pulse had cleared Krith ships from a deadly corridor, but at a cost, damage to civilian zones. The human captain's voice cut through the feed, calm yet commanding. "Collateral is unfortunate, but necessary. Protect the many, not the few. Move civilians now." It was a lesson no cadet could forget. Human courage was not absence of fear. It was calculated, disciplined sacrifice for the greater good. Faith under fire. In one corner of the city, a human squad paused behind rubble. One soldier, bruised and bloodied, raised his gaze toward the stars. His voice, barely audible over the chaos, whispered, "Not luck. Someone wanted me to live." Jekthar felt it again. That subtle divine presence. The quiet hand that did not interfere but gently guided. The same unseen rhythm that allowed humans to defy odds. It was proof that human survival was never random. Faith, in the universe, in each other, in something larger, was tangible in action. Velu, standing beside him, whispered, They believe in something greater. Yes, Jekthar replied, and that belief makes them dangerous and inspiring. The Krith, disoriented by humans' ingenuity and coordinated attacks, began retreating in scattered formations. The Arc class fired another pulse, thinning their ranks further. Ground squads moved in synchronized waves, rescuing civilians, stabilizing structures, and neutralizing threats with creativity and precision. The cadets, previously arrogant and mocking, were silent. Respect and awe replaced fear. Jekthar's heart, scales, and minds alike felt the weight of understanding. Humanity was unstoppable not because of raw power, but because of their relentless will, empathy, and ingenious application of strategy under pressure. Velu finally muttered, her voice trembling. I understand now. The Council was right to fear them, but not for what I thought. Jekthar's eyes remained on the feed. The humans were winning battles that should have been impossible, but the battle was not over. Somewhere beyond the smoke, beyond the fire, beyond the debris, the Krith regrouped. And somewhere another test, unseen, unfathomable, was preparing to strike. The Academy was trembling still, though the immediate storm of destruction had paused. Cadets and instructors alike stumbled over shattered floor panels and twisted metal. Smoke curled like serpents through broken corridors, carrying with it the acrid scent of scorched circuits and ozone. Every flickering light seemed to whisper warning, every tremor a heartbeat of a universe that refused to settle. Jekthar moved carefully, senses alert. The ground beneath him was scarred from the Arc class's orbital pulse. The air filled with tension so thick it made breathing difficult. Above them, the Arc class loomed, battered, brilliant, a testament to human ingenuity and willpower. Its weapons glowed intermittently, yet it remained poised, a sentinel in orbit, preparing for the next wave. And yet the cadets weren't looking upward. They were looking inward, because fear is contagious. The shadow of doubt it began subtly. Whispers, hushed and trembling. The students began to question everything they had been taught. Are the humans really saviors? One hissed. Or are they predators in disguise? Another muttered. What if the Council was right to ban them? Jekthar's heart thumped painfully. He recognized the dangerous weight of doubt. The humans weren't here just to fight Krith. They were here to challenge perceptions, to unsettle every assumption the Academy had ever held. Velu, usually rigid with logic, looked stricken. They've saved lives. But is it enough? No, Jekthar admitted softly. Not enough for some, but enough to show who they are. That's what matters. It was the first lesson the cadets hadn't yet understood. Fear of the unknown is more potent than any weapon, and humanity had arrived to confront that fear, not to slay it with brute force, but to illuminate it with relentless, human defiance. The next threat, the feed from the Arc class, flickered, showing distant Krith forces regrouping. This time they weren't coming directly at the planet. They were adapting, learning. A fleet of stealth-capable Krith destroyers emerged from the shadowed edges of the system, attempting to flank the humans' positions. Jekthar felt a shiver of recognition. The Krith were cunning, yes, but they were predictable in one thing: fear. They attacked patterns, weaknesses, hesitations, and humanity had none of these. Yet even as he thought it, he saw the subtle cracks. Civilians trapped, cadets frozen with indecision, infrastructure damaged, shields failing. It was a stark reminder that human courage, though extraordinary, operated within limits. Even legends must navigate the fragile boundaries of mortality. A lesson in observation, Jekthar's gaze locked on a small group of human scouts maneuvering through the upper city districts. Each soldier moved with uncanny precision, improvising traps from rubble, guiding civilians past hazards, and adapting to attacks in real time. One soldier, a young man with a jagged scar across his cheek, noticed a Krith drone approaching from the side. Instead of firing immediately, he assessed, calculated, and improvised. A nearby pile of debris shifted, unbalancing the drone, sending it crashing into a scorched wall. The soldier didn't celebrate. He kept moving, eyes scanning for the next threat. Cadets watching the feed gasped. Jekthar's voice was low, almost reverent. Notice. They don't react, they anticipate. They don't panic, they adapt. This is why the Council feared them. Velu's jaw dropped. And they're not invincible. They're just relentless. Relentless is enough, Jekthar murmured. It always is. Internal battle. As the humans continued their operation, Jekthar felt his internal conflict intensify. He had grown up believing that knowledge, preparation, and logic were sufficient to survive. Now he realized the truth. None of that mattered without will, without faith, without the stubborn refusal to accept defeat. He glanced at Velu. Do you understand now why the Council banned them? Yes, she said quietly. Because no one else can contain them. Their strength. It's terrifying, Jekthar nodded, but his own heart ached. The terror wasn't just for the aliens witnessing humanity. It was for the humans themselves. The sacrifices, the risk, the moral weight of survival pressed on them constantly, and yet they endured. Faith, courage, ingenuity, intertwined, unstoppable, and utterly human. The price of leadership. Captain Ward's voice cut through the chaos again, steady and commanding. The Ark class adjusted position, unleashing another calculated volley. On the ground, humans rallied civilians and soldiers alike, making impossible decisions with precision and empathy. Jekthar observed, noting how Ward balanced risk and reward, sacrifice and protection. Every choice carried consequence. Every move could end life or save it. Humans were not simply warriors. They were leaders, engineers, and moral arbiters in the heat of battle. A young soldier, pinned by debris, shouted to his squad, "Move the civilians." "I've got this." He rolled a fallen beam into place, shielding others while exposing himself. Jekthar felt the subtle tug of awe, respect, and sorrow simultaneously. Courage came with a cost. Every life saved often meant another risked. It was the first clear lesson of this stage. Humanity's victories were not free, nor clean, nor predictable. But they were deliberate, compassionate, and unfaltering. The shadows. Stir even as humanity fought, Jekthar could sense another danger. Not Krith, not physical threat, but shadowed motives, fear, and envy lurking within the academy. Some cadets whispered of sabotage, of human unpredictability, of the risk their presence posed to the established order. One of them, a young Yule Kor, muttered under his breath, "They're too much, too powerful. We can't control them." The words were not spoken to warn, but to rationalize fear. Jekthar recognized the dangerous thought pattern. Fear could paralyze more than enemies ever could. He knew then that the greatest challenge the humans faced wasn't the Krith. It was the alien fear of humanity itself. And the cadets, still frozen by disbelief, were the first victims of this insidious enemy. Human ingenuity prevails. Back on the streets, a human squad faced overwhelming Krith forces. 2 of their number were injured, 1 critically. The rest improvised a trap using debris, plasma conduits, and improvised drones. A single human soldier directed the energy flow, turning rubble into a defensive lattice. The attack came. The trap activated. Krith units faltered, lost cohesion, then retreated. Civilians were saved. No lives lost. Velu's eyes filled with tears. How are they doing this? They don't just survive, Jekthar said quietly. They teach the universe how to survive. Every act of ingenuity reinforced the lesson. Humans were not merely adapting. They were demonstrating a method of existence, a rhythm of life and defiance that could not be predicted or contained. The divine whisper Jekthar's hearts thrummed in time with the Ark-class pulses. The subtle presence he had sensed throughout this ordeal whispered again. Not audibly, but through timing, through survival. Through miracles orchestrated in moments too precise to be random. The humans were not alone. Not by chance, not by accident, but by design, or perhaps by the quiet intelligence threading life together. It wasn't overt. It wasn't miraculous in a way anyone could quantify, but it was there, a hand in the chaos allowing courage and ingenuity to tip the scales just enough, and the cadets finally felt it, in a quiet moment of stunned silence. The academy's halls were scorched, cracked, and trembling. Smoke choked the air, and flickering emergency lights cast long, jagged shadows across walls smeared with soot. The faint scent of ozone and molten metal filled Jekthar's senses. The world had become a furnace, and every step forward was a negotiation with gravity, fire, and fear. Yet, amidst the chaos, he noticed the cadets' faces, some terrified, some frozen, others hardened by the dawning realization of what true courage looked like. All of them now watched humanity at work, not as distant legends but as living, breathing exemplars of defiance and ingenuity. Above them, the Terran Arc class adjusted its orbit, weapons pulsing with calculated intensity, a celestial guardian among the stars. It was more than a ship, it was a statement, a challenge, a testament. And for the first time, Jekthar understood fully, humans did not merely fight. They transformed the battlefield itself into a lesson, teaching courage, sacrifice, and creativity in every pulse of action. The crushing weight of reality. The next wave of Krith forces descended, faster, smarter, more coordinated than ever before. The humans on the ground responded with instinctive brilliance. Engineers redirected power to deploy defensive shields. Squads improvised barricades and traps using rubble, fire, and plasma arcs as extensions of their will. Civilians were guided to safety with almost prescient timing. Every step calculated and precise. Jekthar could see it all, but the most astonishing detail was subtle. Humans adapted mid-action, correcting mistakes instantly, improvising new strategies without hesitation. One squad leader, a woman with streaks of soot across her face, shouted orders not to retreat, but to flow with the Krith's assault. Her voice was raw with exhaustion, yet unwavering. She didn't inspire fear. She inspired possibility. Belu muttered under her breath, voice trembling. They're untouchable. Not because they can't die, but because they refuse to quit. Jekthar's hearts thumped in agreement. Courage, ingenuity, empathy. These weren't abstract concepts. They were tangible weapons, sharper than any plasma cannon, more formidable than any fleet. Internal turmoil, and yet, Jekthar felt it. A shadow inside him, a whisper of doubt, fear, and inadequacy. He had studied humans, revered them even, but now, seeing them in motion, he was confronted with the terrifying truth. He was unworthy of understanding, unprepared to confront the raw magnitude of their resolve. Velu noticed his hesitation. Are you afraid? He shook his head, though his voice trembled. Not of them, of what they represent, and of what happens to anyone who underestimates that. It was more than fear. It was recognition of the gulf between legend and reality, between theory and practice. The humans weren't simply warriors. They were a force of nature, a measure of what persistence, faith, and ingenuity could accomplish when fused with unbreakable will. The Arc classes danced from orbit. Captain Ward orchestrated the orbital strikes with terrifying precision. The Krith fleet faltered under the combined assault of human ingenuity from both above and below. Plasma beams traced arcs of fire through the void, collapsing entire formations with surgical accuracy. Yet Ward's genius was not simply technological. It was empathic. He anticipated civilian movements, synchronized with ground squads, and adapted to enemy tactics in real time. Every pulse of his weaponry was an extension of strategy, sacrifice, and foresight. Jekthar noticed a moment that defied understanding. A single beam of orbital fire narrowly missed a collapsed building where civilians were trapped, clearing Krith drones without harming anyone below. Timing, positioning, and precision converged in a moment that felt almost miraculous, Velu whispered, voice trembling with awe. Not luck, someone guided them. Jekthar nodded, aware of the same subtle divine presence that had carried humanity through countless perils. It wasn't miraculous in a traditional sense. It was rhythm, timing, subtle balance, a whisper of something greater woven through survival. The saboteur's last move inside the academy, the saboteur had not given up. They struck again, attempting to override key systems that maintained critical structural integrity. Jekthar intercepted, a flurry of precision and strategy, moving faster than any panic-driven cadet could react. You don't understand what you're doing, Jekthar snapped, pinning the intruder against a damaged console. You think you're protecting the academy. You're sabotaging the people who just might save it. The cadet struggled, eyes wide with fear and conviction. I can't. They'll destroy everything we know. Jekthar's gaze hardened. You fear what you don't understand. Step aside or you'll learn why humans are never meant to be underestimated. The cadet hesitated, then yielded. For a brief moment, the weight of understanding, respect born of fear, settled like dust in the room. Human ingenuity at its peak outside, humans on the streets faced overwhelming odds again. A Krith strike team had flanked them, firing plasma arcs that tore through walls and sent civilians fleeing. One squad leader dropped a portable shield generator into the middle of the street, activating it to deflect incoming fire. Another human, gravely injured, hurled a debris-laden drone into the Krith formation, creating chaos. The squad moved as a single organism, improvising, protecting each other, adapting, surviving. It was artistry in motion, courage in every heartbeat, creativity in every gesture. Jekthar realized with growing awe that this was why the Council had feared humans. Not for conquest, not for cruelty, but for the unstoppable combination of will, intellect, empathy, and faith that could reshape any battlefield. Sacrifice and defiance. Then came a moment that would be seared into the memories of all observing. A civilian trapped under a collapsed support beam cried out. A human soldier, exhausted, bloodied, and trembling, threw himself into the wreckage to lift it, exposing himself to direct plasma fire from a Krith sniper. Another soldier dived alongside him, supporting the effort. Together, they saved the civilian, though not without injury. Velu gasped. They risk everything every single time. Jekthar's heart thumped painfully. Humans weren't reckless. They were deliberate, choosing sacrifice when it mattered most. Courage wasn't absence of fear. It was decision in spite of it. A defiance that refused to yield. The subtle presence was there again. Almost tangible. Survival nudged by the universe. Faith made manifest in the smallest miracles of timing and endurance. The first clear understanding, Jekthar turned to the cadets around him. They were silent, eyes wide, faces pale. They had seen courage, ingenuity, faith, and sacrifice all unfold before them, live, unedited, unfiltered. He spoke quietly, almost to himself, but everyone heard. They're not legends. They're not myths. They're humans. And they're unstoppable because they refuse to surrender to fear, to doubt, or to despair. Velu nodded slowly. They're inspiring, terrifying. Everything we thought we knew is wrong. Jekthar's hearts thumped in agreement. Humanity's victories weren't clean. They weren't free. They weren't guaranteed. But they were deliberate, beautiful, and profoundly human. The divine presence above all. Jekthar felt it again. The quiet intelligence threading through the chaos, the subtle nudge that guided survival without dictating it, not miraculous, not overt, but undeniable. It whispered in the timing of orbital strikes, in the improvisation of soldiers on the ground, in the miraculous near misses and perfectly timed rescues. The humans were the instrument, not the hand. The unseen force, vast, subtle, patient, was the rhythm of creation itself, woven through the defiance of life. The smoke had begun to thin, revealing the academy in a wounded, scorched state. Broken panels, scorched walls, and twisted metal littered the halls. The air smelled of ozone and burning polymers, but amidst the destruction there was a strange calm, the moment after chaos, when reality shifts and the impossible feels tangible. Jekthar stood in the central atrium, heart and minds pounding in sync with the distant hum of the art class above. The cadets around him were silent, wide-eyed, pale, their arrogance stripped away by the stark demonstration of human courage. The humans had not merely survived. They had dominated adversity in ways the galaxy's greatest strategists could barely comprehend. And yet the art class was still above, still vigilant. Humanity's fight was far from over, but the first lesson had been delivered. Permanent, undeniable, unforgettable. The calm before the next wave. Outside, the streets were strewn with debris. Fires still burned in isolated pockets, but the humans moved with relentless purpose. They rebuilt barricades, treated the wounded, and continued to strategize. Each action was deliberate, measured, courageous. Every step carried intent. Jekthar noticed something profound. The humans did not celebrate. They did not pause. Their victories were not reasons for glory, but opportunities to push further, to correct mistakes, to save lives. Each moment was a testament to their ingenuity, empathy, and defiance. Velu whispered almost reverently, "They're perfect in imperfection." Jekthar nodded. Not perfect, relentless, clever, compassionate, and unstoppable because they never yield. The subtle presence was there again. the quiet intelligence threading through survival, the invisible hand guiding timing and fate, ensuring that courage met opportunity with a balance that defied chaos. Confronting the Krith once more, the Krith, battered but not defeated, returned in force. Their destroyers emerged from the system's shadowed corners, flanking both orbit and ground. But the humans anticipated the attack. Squads coordinated with orbital fire in patterns that were both unpredictable and precise. Engineers improvised energy barriers. Civilians were evacuated through paths carefully crafted in real time. Soldiers adapted tactics mid-engagement using debris, fire, and improvised drones as extensions of their will. Jekthar felt awe mixed with fear. This was no longer just a battle. It was a demonstration of what the galaxy had feared for centuries. Humans were not merely surviving. They were defining the art of war, the essence of courage, and the power of ingenuity, sacrifice, empathy, and brilliance in one of the city's main avenues. A squad faced an overwhelming Krith formation. 2 of their number were critically wounded. Instead of retreating, the remaining humans devised a plan. A combination of energy conduits, debris, and precise timing created a lethal trap. The Krith fell into it. One soldier, injured and exhausted, used the final energy pulse personally, collapsing the trap with his own body as a shield to protect others. Velu gasped. They had to risk everything, every time. Jekthar's heart thumped painfully. Humans were not reckless. They were deliberate, choosing sacrifice when it mattered most. Courage was decision in spite of fear, a defiance that refused to yield, a lesson burned into every observer's mind, and above, the Arc class continued to orchestrate orbital strikes with unmatched precision, protecting civilians and reinforcing ground operations. Jekthar felt the divine whisper once more, subtle, patient, guiding the impossible to fruition. The Academy's cadets transformed. Jekthar turned to the cadets surrounding him. Their faces, pale and awed, reflected understanding. The arrogance that had led them to mock humanity was gone, replaced by respect, fear, and a profound revelation. They're not legends, Jekthar said quietly. They're real, and they're unstoppable because they refuse to surrender, to fear, to doubt, or to despair. Velu nodded slowly. I understand now. The Council was right to fear them, but not for the reasons I thought. Jekthar's gaze returned to the feet of the battlefield. Humans were still moving, still saving lives, still adapting. The lesson was clear. Humanity's strength was not merely in power, numbers, or technology, but in creativity, empathy, ingenuity, and indomitable will. The turning point, the Krith launched a coordinated assault, their destroyers concentrating fire on key city sectors. The humans, however, were ready. Squads anticipated movement patterns, redirected civilians, and improvised defenses on the fly. One soldier, critically injured, climbed onto a plasma conduit and rerouted power mid-fight, creating a pulse that disabled multiple enemy drones. Another used debris to construct a kinetic trap, turning the enemy's aggression into their own downfall. Every move, every decision reflected the human essence, courage, ingenuity, empathy, defiance. It was a living, breathing lesson in survival and strategy. Jekthar's hearts thumped in rhythm with their courage. He realized the ultimate truth. Humans were unstoppable because they never surrendered to circumstances. Faith in the unseen. Amidst the chaos, subtle moments of faith emerged. A human soldier paused to whisper a prayer over an injured comrade. Another glanced at the stars and muttered, "This can't just be an accident." The Arc class deployed a synchronized orbital strike, narrowly avoiding civilians in a maneuver that seemed almost guided by intuition. Timing, precision, survival, aligned perfectly, as though an unseen intelligence ensured the balance. Jekthar finally understood the presence that had accompanied every human act. It wasn't overt. It wasn't preachy, but it was undeniable. The subtle intelligence of the universe, guiding, shaping, balancing. Humans were instruments of courage and ingenuity, and the divine rhythm flowed through them, imperceptible yet real. The final push, the Krith's morale faltered. Their formations broke under relentless human adaptability and orbital precision. The Arc class unleashed a final pulse, disrupting enemy coordination. Ground squads pressed forward, rescuing civilians, securing key points, and improvising with astonishing efficiency. Jekthar watched as humanity executed a flawless orchestration of sacrifice, ingenuity, and courage. Every action told a story of survival and defiance. Every choice reflected empathy, willpower, and creativity under pressure. Velu whispered, tears in her eyes. They're teaching the galaxy how to survive, how to fight, how to endure. Jekthar nodded, hearts pounding. She was right. This was more than battle. It was a revelation. As the last Krith units retreated, the humans regrouped. Civilians emerged from hiding, trembling but alive. Injured soldiers were aided by comrades. Engineers repaired crucial systems in the field. The Ark class hovered like a silent guardian above, weapons ready but not needed. Humanity had triumphed. The cadets, once mocking, now knelt, humbled. Respect and fear mingled in their expressions. They had witnessed something extraordinary, something that transcended legend, myth, and theory. Jekthar spoke, his voice quiet yet resonant. They are humans. Not perfect, not invincible, but unstoppable because they refuse to yield, and because they believe in themselves, in each other, and in the rhythm of the universe that allows them to endure. Velu added softly, I understand now. They're why the council banned them, not because they were weak, but because they cannot be contained. Jekthar turned back to the battlefield, now calm but scarred. Humans moved among the ruins, tending the wounded, salvaging resources, and preparing for the unknown. They were relentless, adaptive, and unyielding. The subtle divine presence lingered, a whisper in the timing, a nudge in survival, a rhythm that made impossibility bend just enough for courage to flourish. And Jekthar realized the ultimate truth. Humanity's strength was not merely in battle. It was in their creativity, empathy, ingenuity, courage, and faith. They survived where others failed. They inspired where others despaired. They taught the galaxy that hope and will could bend even the harshest odds. Jekthar's gaze rose to the stars, the Ark class above, the devastated city below, and the humans moving among it all. A single thought echoed through him, simple yet profound. And somewhere in the vastness of space, humanity continued to defy the impossible. Because they believed, and because the universe, subtle, patient, and immense, believed in them too. The cadets around him were silent, transformed. The lesson had been seared into their minds, impossible to ignore. The humans were unstoppable, uncontainable, and utterly magnificent.